Thank you all for being on time. Of course, this is day 7 of the Akom Kese virtual conference, and thank you all for sticking with us and staying with us for the last day. Today is going to be the youth presentation. One of the main reasons we did this session was because a lot of the young people were indicating that they didn't have a voice. And of course, Akom Kese wants to pride itself on providing a platform for all persons to have a voice in this culture. So we provided them with the platform and they came up with this presentation for us. Now, the reason we are showing this presentation again this year was because a lot of the people who signed up for Akom Kese last year did not have an opportunity to view this presentation because it conflicted with another presentation. So we are more than happy to show it again. At the end of this presentation, what we'll do is have a discussion based upon what the young people are feeling and what their presentation centered around. So the young people who got together and developed this presentation, their names are Afia Tyus, also Afia Anoche, Ajwa Amoa, Okari Ajaman, Yao Nkrumah, Deasia Bandy. So all 6 of these young people got together and put together this presentation. So without further ado, we will start showing you what was recorded last year. And at the end of the discussion, we can start with a discussion based upon how they're feeling and some of their points of view from growing up within the Akom culture and their views on where they see the future going with them as their leaders.
Before we get started, greetings everyone. Hope you're enjoying the conference. We've had such an amazing week. It's been long, it's been a lot of hard work. So definitely want to thank all the board members who've made some significant contributions to allowing this to week get off. Just for some housekeeping rules. So today this presentation is from 7 to 8:30. And then after this meeting, we will break out into the men's and women's meetings, which are supposedly an hour each, from 8:30 to 9:30. And then after that, we will come back and have a closing, which will be from 9:30 to 10. So tonight is rather long because normally we go from like 7 to 9. So we're going to see, we'll see how it, go play it by ear in terms of how people are feeling, because it is rather long. It's a Friday night. And spending your whole night on Zoom probably isn't what you call fun or exciting, but we definitely want to engage with everyone and be able to have these meetings. Normally, this would be something that would happen concurrently. We would have the men and the women meeting, but as we're learning and working with this platform, we're trying different things to see what works best. So, it's all an experiment, but nonetheless, hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, we'll start the video. And then I know Andrea said that we can listen to it and at the end we can probably discuss about it. But I mean, if you have a pressing question and it's something that you want to interject, I guess you could probably raise your hand and we can stop the video and talk about it in terms of getting some dialogue going. If it's because the presentation is about an hour long, so it might be better to break it up if you have a question or something that's pressing that you want to deal with then. Right? So
sounds good. Let's get it started.
Is there supposed to be sound?
Yes, there is sound with this. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties with it. It's background music.
I was really interested in Yao's quote that he chose to present on. And so I asked myself, if out of our culture comes everything, then where does our activism live? Because included in that quote was, out of our culture comes our politics, comes the way we eat, comes the way we raise our families, and so on. And if you know me, you know that I am deeply embedded in the political world, no matter how much I may dislike it. And so I thought this was a timely presentation because reconciling these different terms of Black, African, African-American is a conversation that I've been having my entire college career. And I have made it a point to make it very clear that I walk as a descendant of slaves who practices the Akom religion. And I think what's in some ways the core of our culture in America is that we are Americans and that we did choose this and chose to expand it in a way that worked for us. And so today, while I was raised in a Pan-African community, like while I went to Nation House, which is very pro-Black, very Pan-African, has its own issues. But in that
Okay. Can everybody hear the video or you're just seeing the pictures?
I can hear it now.
I missed the whole beginning of it.
I did hear some of it. It's stopped now.
I just stopped it, so I just wanted to see, because is everyone able to hear? I'm gonna,
Yes.
Yeah, the
Yes.
voices are
Now,
clear now.
but really didn't follow what was
hear it.
going on in the beginning because you couldn't hear anything in the beginning.
it was just drums, music. I can restart it, so let's see. I hear that?
Yes,
Part we're just supposed to read it by ourselves.
Yeah,
yes.
it's just reading, yeah, right. So did you hear,
Okay.
that?
Right.
Right. So you want me to start over? Start it over? Everybody good?
Yes, start it over. Everyone read the first slides by yourself until one of the presenters starts speaking. Yeah, it looks like we're having technical difficulties with the music. I would just make sure everyone mutes themselves during this presentation.
I was really interested in Yao's quote that he chose to present on. And so I asked myself, if out of our culture comes everything, then where does our activism live? Because included in that quote was, out of our culture comes our politics, comes the way we eat, comes the way we raise our families, and so on. And if you know me, you know that I am deeply embedded in the political world, no matter how much I may dislike it. And so I thought this was a timely presentation because reconciling these different terms of Black, African, African-American is a conversation that I've been having my entire college career. And I have made it a point to make it very clear that I walk as a descendant of slaves who practices the Akan religion. And I think what's in some ways the core of our culture in America is that we are Americans and that we did choose this and chose to expand it in a way that worked for us. And so today, while I was raised in a Pan-African community, like while I went to Nation House, which is very pro-Black, very Pan-African, has its own issues. But in that community, we used Africans and Black African-American interchangeably. But today, I very much make it a pointed decision to call myself a Black American. My roots, my mom is from rural Georgia, and my dad's roots are all throughout the South. And so I think as I developed as a young woman, particularly through these last 4 years of college, it was important for me to put that at the forefront of my identity. And I think as we talk about religion, as we get older and as we expand into the world, our religion, in some ways, you don't want it to be the first thing that people see when they look at you, right? Like my name is Afia, and so people would always ask me where I was really from, right? Well, I'm not really from Ghana, right? But my culture is Ghana. And so I wanted to make that distinction very clear. And so it's important to me to recognize the uniqueness of what it means to exist both today in our Africanness and our Americanness, because the issues that we face as Americans, because we live here, are truly unique and very, very different from what is faced on the continent. And the issues of what people face on the continent are different depending on what country they're in. And I think personally, it's very important that we become more open about these conversations. Because while I grew up in a Pan-African community, I often see the Pan-African community and the Akan community as separate. And so the education that I got from the Pan-African community, while people who were in the Akan culture and the Akan faith were there, it was a separate entity. And so I would love to see us as a culture embody more of Pan-African ideals, or to just embody more activism, to take more action in our day-to-day lives, because the issues that we face as Black Americans do not go away when we enter our bubble. And so issues like gun control, issues like mass incarceration rates, those affect us. But I personally have not seen us talk about it. And so in the past few months, I started a nonprofit called Hand in Hand DC, which works to support protesters on the ground. But the true mission is really to meet the movement for Black lives from wherever we are, right? Like some people's activism looks like donating money. Some people's activism looks like marching in the streets. And I think as a community, we get to decide what our activism looks like. But I don't think it's ever excusable for our activism to just be quiet and for us not to be coming together, actively to be having these discussions. And so what we did with my nonprofit was to create these, what we call protest packs, to give essential PPE supplies and snacks, water, Gatorade, all that good stuff, first aid, I think we got it to like 3,000 packs out. And we split our materials between protesters and organizations supporting homelessness in the district, in DC. Because the movement for Black lives looks very different in very different places, right? We have to meet people at homeless shelters because a lot of the attack on Black lives is in housing. And so I would love for us to be more open about these discussions and be more open to incorporating our values into what activism looks like. Like we're still a very young organization and we still don't know what is going to come next, but I think we do have to push ourselves and challenge ourselves to expand.
When we talk about community, I feel like we have to be inclusive to every part of that community. And in my experience within the Black community, Akom culture, African American, whatever name that you choose, there's a lot of pushback on the LGBTQIA community. And in our discussion, we discussed the future of the Akom culture. And a lot of it is the youth. And I think one thing that we don't talk about openly enough is the spectrum of sexuality. And in our conversations, a lot of youth, for example, don't want to come back or don't want to participate because they feel shunned, because they don't feel welcomed. So I want to say, when we're going forward and when we're deciding to be open and we call ourselves a community, we have to look at what community really means and how we choose to define that, because you can't say we're a community and then shun me because now I like women, or because now I say I don't like, or now I'm non-binary, or now I want to tell you which pronoun I'd like for you to use, and now you're looking at me sideways. I think we have to walk with community and walk with it as a whole, because we, like Afia said, we don't get to just live in our little bubble. And that's often what it feels like. We come, we home, we talk, we eat, we do our shrine work, blah, 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 we go home. But now I'm going home and now I'm walking in the room with all these white kids, if we're being honest. Or seriously, so when we're talking about community, we have to be specific in our intention. And community has to mean our other Black brothers and sisters that are behind us. It cannot just mean us by ourselves, because we are not by ourselves. We all have people, cousins, families, whatever. So we have to be universal to them. We have to be a community for them fully. So Afia, you want me to read this part of the slide, or do you want to read it?
Go for it.
Great. Blackness and the LGBTQ plus community. Oftentimes in conversations around activism and communal changes, we are not inclusive of all peoples. Let's protect all of our children and allow visibility in every part of us. Freedom is not just for cisgendered heterosexual men. I'm gonna say that one again. Freedom is not just for cisgendered heterosexual men.
And if
Wow.
you're not familiar with that term, cisgender, it just means that you identify with the gender with which you were born. You're the sex with which you were born.
While we often think this perspective is not our own, we have to take a hard look at our day-to-day actions and how children internalize the messages that we give them. I'm going to stress that part again. It's important for us as a community, and this community specifically, because we're so tight. A lot of us know each other. A lot of us have seen other people have children and raised, and it's very much a community to an extent. So we have to think about our actions. We have to think about what we're saying. We have to think about how that affects future generations. We have to think about how, if I'm a person that's walking in the Akom culture and I know somebody else who maybe doesn't, but is thinking about a spiritual practice, and I am not sure about the LGBTQIA community and how that it fits and involved. Now we don't have someone. Now we've just lost someone who was looking for something, who was looking for spirituality, who was looking for connection. So I think I would love for everyone to take from this to just really look at how you feel about the LGBTQIA community and why. And if we're gonna walk in an atmosphere where we stress community, then we need to really, really truthfully, wholeheartedly be communal to all people, all Black people.
And I think as we have this conversation, it means we have to take a hard look at some of our traditions. It means we have to look at things like day names, right? Day names are very gendered. You're a female or you're a male, and you get a name based on it. But what happens when you have a child that doesn't identify with one of those categories? And it doesn't mean that these things are inherently wrong. It just means that we need to have a conversation, a broader understanding of what it means moving forward as we have a more expanded understanding of the world.
Me personally, I feel like it is a conversation that needs to be had. My belief in terms of traditions, I do believe in gender roles, and I do believe in freedom of choice. I think that there is, I don't feel like anybody out in our community should be ostracized, or anybody in our community should feel uncomfortable coming around because of their sexual preference choice. I do understand that our traditions come from an ancient time, you know, and they've been passed down. And like all cultures, culture is something that's flexible and something that's fluid. And I feel like we shouldn't put people kind of in a box, or I think that there's a lot of people that just would not feel welcome in the space. And I think that no matter what, that we should work on making a safe space for our family, you know. And I would hate to have any of my family members or any person that I care about that I know that would feel ostracized or would feel uncomfortable coming around because of their sexual preference, because that's not the way in which I judge them. That's not the way in which I define them. That's their own private business, me personally. So if you want to be however you perceive yourself, then that's how you perceive yourself. I do think that I do personally feel that there are specific is interesting. Something that's coming to my mind. When I went to Iowa, there's the young gentleman that I met he identified as feminine. You know, he said that he is a divine feminine energy within this physical body. And it kind of brings out the question of spirit a little bit more, because if we think about it, you got male spirits, female spirits, possessing males, possessing females. This person is marrying this spirit. This person is marrying this spirit. So it's a little bit fluid in spirituality, but it's not fluid in human physical, in our physical interactions. I feel like the traditions the traditions are supposed to, rather I say. And I say that because they've been passed down and they came from across the seas, and even Africans and we all have a certain amount of conditioning that we have to break through. But I think the most important thing is definitely creating a safe space for us. I do value feminine energy. I do value masculine energy. I do feel like they have their roles, but I do think that people have to understand that we have both of those energies within us. And I think that the traditions are supposed to enlighten or enliven that. And if they don't do that, then we are going to be subject to the conditioning of society, whether that be good, bad, right, wrong. That's not my decision. But I know that once I see you in my face, if you my family, I'm not going to shun you, or I'm not going to look at you different for whatever choice that you made and how you express your sexuality, how you express your being, how you express yourself. So that's my personal opinion.
I'm so thrilled to introduce our second and last segment of our presentation, which is our vision for the culture and the future. And so with that, I'm going to describe it with 3 adjectives. And those 3 adjectives are accessibility, attractiveness, and all-inclusiveness. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we don't use all 3 of these adjectives. We're not using it to the best of our abilities, but I think we should hone in on these 3 adjectives and utilize them a bit more. So starting with the first adjective, accessibility. I think the Akom culture must be easily accessible to all. When I say all, I mean members of our current Akom culture and prospective members, because we're of course trying to grow and prosper and enlighten others with the importance of the Akom culture by means of virtual interactions and in-person interactions. So we have been grateful to partake in virtual interactions due to an unfortunate circumstance, COVID-19. I feel once we pass this event and we figure out a vaccine or whatever it may be, and we're able to meet face to face, our virtual interactions should not come to a cease until an end. We need to continue with both, because as we're seeing, there are several youth or several adults, just anyone in the culture that is not necessarily in close proximity to everyone else in DC or in New York City or wherever it may be. So the virtual world allows all of us to come together. And so I think by doing that, we should enhance and start doing monthly or bi-weekly, but because I'm a youth, I like to say twice a month, having sessions twice a month or once a month for youth to come together and allow that establishment of us to kind of learn and practice the ways of being in Akom. It is necessary for youth to interact with people like them that can relate to them, someone that is their age, similar to them, goes through the same things that they're going through every day. Like, oh my gosh, my teacher can't say my name right. It's taking them 15 tries. Just someone that can relate to them on that relatable circumstances of that nature. And I believe by doing that, having meetings with people is really essential to get into that, which will also allow for an environment for us to open up and have that safe and respectful questioning and conversation. What does it mean to have my name? Or why do we have Akoms? Like, what is the whole purpose of it? What is a deity? What does a deity mean? And so having a youth session and forum allows for youth to ask those questions that they may be scared to ask when they're watching and learning from their elderlies and peers around them. And then so from there, I believe it's extremely important to have a point of contact to further our next point, which is attractiveness. Now, when I say attractiveness, I say it to kind of continue on with the 3 A's of my adjectives, but really to say engagement. We really need to increase our engagement as Akons and the Akom cultures. So by having our first session, we should have a point of contact for all the youth to go to when they're coming with conflicts or just questioning for anything. And even, okay, so I'm a youth and I'm realizing that I like to dance. I want to be a dancer. I want to be more involved with Akom dance and culture. Who do I talk to? So you go to your contact within the youth group and they'll connect you with someone that loves dance and has several more resources for that youth that's involved in dance. Or whether you're a food enthusiast, you want to learn how to make more Akom foods at home, more fish dishes, more rice dishes, whatever the dish may be. And so you're looking for that point of contact with people that are into cooking and spices and resources for that. And then from there, that will continue with having that open dialogue and connections and building upon the relationships that we already have. Again, and so that allows that youth to really hone into that interest or subject that they really have. And again, when I say attractiveness, I mean engagement. We must draw attention to the foundations of the cultures all the time on a regular basis. So I think it's important to draw attention to the foundations of Akom culture and the purpose of the way of life that we're going through, and doing that in a creative way, which again, it goes all the way back to having that youth session, to do that in a creative way that attracts them to understand and really have a fine line of the foundation of Akom culture, and to also provide them with resources to kind of make their own elevator pitch in a sense. So when I go across my front, I can really tell them what Akom culture is, why I'm wearing this attire, why I speak this way, or why I think this way, because I know what culture truly is, whether I'm someone that comes to one meeting, whether I'm someone that comes to all the meetings, or someone that's here, that comes here and there. And so I think it's really important, again, like I said, to highlight the true foundations and importance to Akom cultures, regardless if you're a dedicated person to the culture or not as dedicated to someone that's truly excited and passionate about it. And then, so once we figure that out, I think it's truly important to be all-inclusive with the Akom culture. And when I say all-inclusive, I'm not saying we aren't doing that already, but to really bring that to its fullest potential and find out the purpose to why our members are part of the Akom culture. Are they really there because of the spiritual needs, or are they there for the social needs? And once we figure that out, we can really tailor to our members on what sessions they should be a part of, how they can be involved, and how they can be engaged. Because it's really important, again, to highlight the essential needs of all of our members. And I think an easy way and fun way to do that is start off with social activities, like how we're doing right now, virtual interactions. We can do virtual community service. We can do girls trips similar to the camps that the boys already have. Themed Zoom sessions. And I also want to point out that there's a difference between Zoom sessions and Zoom workshops. Sessions are more socializing and fun activities like painting and listening to music, while a workshop is, of course, socializing, but also educating, with the main purpose of educating others about mental health or whatever the subject may be. And fashion shows or talent shows. And really, I think the best way to do this is by sending out a survey and figuring out what everyone's interests are and hobbies are, so we can have those sessions or workshops that highlights everybody's interests and concerns.
Our own people do not understand the concept of sticking together and pooling resources to try and build something. In order to build, we need money and resources. We hope that our children will be the generation who will understand the importance of owning land and property. Now, when I chose this quote, a lot of what I envision for our future and the things that I am working to be involved in are just that: pooling resources together, purchasing land, purchasing property. But when we discussed this, I was asked yet again for examples of how this is going to be possible. And so another example came to mind. And one of the things that will make this possible is to encourage entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur myself, and I guess the main example that I'll use is my godfather, Uncle Kese, who is the spearhead of this entire project. Now, Uncle Kese, as we all know, has a PhD. However, the endeavor that I see him involved in the most, and that I see a lot of success in, and that he's been able to truly help our communities with, is his recycling center on Murdoch Avenue. Every time I see him, when I drop off bottles that we collect at Onipa, he's always saying, you know, business is good. He doesn't have any complaints. The COVID-19 pandemic allowed his business to boom even more. And so it's very inspiring for me to see that. Now, Uncle Kese, with his business, was able to create several fundraisers in order to purchase buildings, in order to purchase land, in order to purchase the things that we truly need to exist as a strong and resourceful community. Now, this was possible through his business. Now, I'll go back again. Yes, he did attend college. He has his PhD. And he may argue with me and say that it is his PhD that allowed him to begin and run such a fruitful business. However, he still has the business. And I think he's such a bright man and such a steadfast person that he could have done this business, the recycling business, without going to college. Now, he may argue with me on that, but again, seeing his business as fruitful as it is, and him being able to establish fundraisers in order to support our community is inspiring like no other. And so I intend to do the same. I have already began my own business, my butcher shop business. It's doing well. I hope for it to do better. I'm closing on a new space in August to operate out of. And I intend to do more of that. But not only that, I intend to be more of like an incubator or a hub for more of our youth members in the community to encourage entrepreneurship, to encourage business, because that is what's going to truly get us the property and the land that we need to exist as a community. A lot of the other cultures do it. They come here as immigrants, they start businesses. Yes, their children go to college, the children come back and they're able to do things within the business because of their college education. But the first thing they do when they get here is they open businesses and they run them well. And so that is my vision for the future. That is what I will be involved in wholeheartedly, is encouraging entrepreneurship. Thank you. If anyone has any.
So let me respond real quickly. So yes, in terms of education and having a doctorate degree, it really was a necessary step in order for me to do what I'm doing now. So I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, even when I was in college. But had I not been in that position, I would have never opened up the business. But the reason that I opened up the business is because the students that I was working with were struggling and they could not afford college. So because as a researcher, as of just things that I've done, it was something that inspired me to open up the business. The education part is critical. You know, understanding the language of business, understanding what a cash flow statement is, understanding financial statement, understanding balance sheets, understanding all those things that are required. So when you're going to banks and you're talking to them about these type of things, they are aware of that you're knowledgeable. So the education piece is important. So I don't want you to think like, well, he got a PhD. He didn't have to have a PhD to get this business. He could have just started it. No, that actually was a critical step. And now that I'm in my position, I can help you. So you don't have to get a PhD. You understand what I'm saying? You don't have to get a PhD because you have a community. You have someone in your community and your
Alert from low battery.
skip those steps. My father was a bus driver. He didn't have enough knowledge to tell me the things that I needed so that I would not have to go through that. But he did encourage me because he planted the seed for the recycling when I was 13, 14 years old. So, you know, everything has its steps. So your generation and the kids that are coming after you, yeah, you have a resource in your community where I can talk to you and tell you, this is what you can do, X, Y, and Z. You don't have to go through all the stuff that I went through, getting a PhD to do some of these things. So, I mean, it's an important step in terms of my development as a person, in terms of the things that I've had to learn. But now that I've learned that knowledge and I've gathered it, I can share it with you to make you better, and you can shortcut some of those things that are doing. So, and if you look at those other communities, those people are coming here with a knowledge base. We're not having it, we're developing it now.
Okay, I'm just going to stop this video for a few minutes just to address a question I see in the chat. One of the questions I see in the chat from Nana Bakan was that she wanted to know what initiatives came out of this discussion from last year. Well, it was very difficult for this group to continue with their initiatives. What they were doing were they were actually reaching out to most of the presenters in this group were between the ages of 20 and 25. And the majority of them were engaged in college. But what they did do is they set aside a certain time, anywhere from 1 to 2 times a month, to actually reach out to the younger teenagers of the Akom community and try to meet with them and speak with them and just try to encourage them and mentor them, per se, on the avenues that's best for them to take, weaving and going in and out of life as an Akom. Unfortunately, COVID hit and a lot of the presenters were also in school. So it kind of paused, but it didn't stop because a lot of them still want to continue. It's just the timing. So that's one of the initiatives that actually came out of it. They were actually meeting with some of the younger individuals within the community.
So I take a little different view on this, in the sense that, you know, they are young people. So I mean, they can definitely come together and provide a resource and support for each other. But I'm looking at this from the perspective of what are we as adults doing to support them? So what initiative have we created to support the youth? And the answer is nothing. None.
And I think that's one of the struggles and the issues that a lot of them had, is that they feel that as a community in itself, they don't feel that they're supported. They don't feel that their voices are actually heard. And that's just from speaking to them individually and as a group. That's some of the, that's their feelings. That's how they feel.
So part of this presentation is for us to just listen to what they're saying, and then, you know, let's have adult conversations about that. What does that look like? What does that mean? And, you know, what are your thoughts about some of the things that they're saying? I mean, I have some strong feelings about a few things. So, but, you know, we can continue with the conversation, and then I'll continue with the presentation, and then we more than definitely can speak. Is anything else in the chat that you want to point out right now?
No, nothing pertaining to the youth presentation.
Are we actively going to work to preserve the culture as the elders pass? Because that's inevitable. So I believe that we should learn what we can now. When I say we learn what we can, like the youth, we should actively listen, and we should pay attention to the way things are established. So we should listen to our elders and what they talk about. I also believe that we should teach our future kids traditions, and we should tell them about the elders, who we looked up to and why, like, you know, our favorite aunties or uncles, and why we looked up to them, what we liked about them. I also believe that we should talk about books a lot. We should read them, keep them, and the books should be from accredited sources, because there's the topic about like the person who's telling the story. Like, it depends on, like, the narrator of the story is going to influence how the story is being told. So you want to make sure that the source is okay. Another question is, what is it that people are looking for that will allow the culture to supplement what they need and desire? So something we touched upon earlier is that not everybody is looking for the same thing. Not everyone is looking for the spiritual aspect. Some people are just looking for a community that they can bond with. Some people just want a sense of identity. And then yes, some people want the spiritual aspect. And I also believe that we should emphasize the process of warming someone up to the culture. So when someone comes to an Akom for the first time, they may not know what's going on. And we often have like a welcoming attitude that we emphasize. And I think that can really help. We should offer to answer questions. We should get people accustomed. And also, we should be approachable. We shouldn't make people feel like dumb or ignorant because of the questions they ask. So, yes, that's basically what I should emphasize. Why should we encourage venturing off to college? Staying home, it may seem ideal, but I feel like we should branch out and then bring back like what we learned from school and bring it back home. And getting away from home allows us to learn new things and stop living in a bubble. We interact with new people. We learn new things, not just educational things, but we learn things about society, how other people operate, not just people within our community. And I feel like that's important to bring back home.
I agree with that 100%. Going on and continue, probably going to touch on that a little bit more, but to start off, and as you all heard from my fellow presenters, the spiritual and the social dynamics of the Akom culture, both are embodied within the culture and interact with each other, but they're not the same. So my question is, how do we give each of them their respective attention? I think it's been kind of a common theme that this culture, Akoms in America, is not, it can be mistaken for a religion. I thought it was a religion. I believe that it is the religion. I've been raised with that ideal in my mind since I was young. But I look at culture as a whole, and this conversation of us being African American and Black Americans, have, if not 75% of the young men in this culture play Guinea drumming. They all play djembe drumming. That's not a con. You feel me? So I say that to say that we should acknowledge and choose the things that are feeding our spirit and not say anything is one versus another. I think that within the culture, sometimes people who don't come to our home or don't participate in our home don't feel as if they're kind. And I'm glad to say that I have some friends who don't feel that way at all, and they never come to our home. They never come, for anything spiritual. But if you see them in the street in Brooklyn or something, they identify 100% wholeheartedly as a con. And maybe you never saw them at any event, any kind of event, but that doesn't change the way in which they identify themselves. So maybe what they get out of being a con is more of the social aspect that social identity, which fortifies their spirit. So now the way in which they choose to express their Akonism is onto them. It might not be, coming to drum or coming to dance, but they still walk with that identity with them no matter where they go. So I think that we should have more events, events that just kind of celebrate all the parts of our culture, whether it be jazz, whether it be Guinean dancing, whether it be hip hop, all of the different things that our culture as Akoms in America is an amalgamation of. I think that all of those things need to be respected. And I think that is one way in which we would feel as youth, and I don't mean to speak for anyone, but that we are giving reference to the Black Americans who came and were forced to express their culture in a different way, or was forced to kind of mold their culture in a different way and mold the culture of the world, because everybody follows Black culture. Everybody is a product of Black culture. And so I say that to say, going on to the next point, how do we rebrand the culture for ourselves and our communities? How is the culture advertised and portrayed? And how do we connect with the Black community? Like Fruit of Islam, FOI is Fruit of Islam, for those who don't know. There's some people that I follow on social media, Riza Islam, Danique Star. These are the young people, young people with Fruit of Islam. And they might be out there rapping. They might be out there, just spreading knowledge, writing books, this, that, and the third, but they all identify as the same thing. The way they express that thing is different. We all can identify as Akan, especially Akans in America, and the way in which we express it may be different. So what is the common principle as to why we are Akan? What's the common principle that is the source of our action and our activity and our pride? I wear African garb top to bottom with a do-rag on plenty of times. And it's people that see me in a whole lot of different spaces and areas, and I'm very confident in myself. I'm very confident because, the culture has given me that foundation. But I think I was also privy to certain things that other people weren't privy to. I think also, I don't think that it was like that all the time for me. Me maturing, it took years, going through school and having to deal with being the only African booty scratcher. And it wasn't always very smooth. It wasn't always something that if you, as a young adolescent growing up and having to interact with all of these different cultures and all of these different people, sometimes it wasn't the most proud, engendering thing, because kids are cruel, man. Kids are cruel, man. They'll make fun of you for anything and everything. So I think that there's a certain level of trauma that's attached to that, and I think that branding as a culture, branding what it is that makes us a collective, what it is that brings us together, no matter how we express it differently, but knowing exactly what it is that we have in common is very important. And I think that for the youth, especially, that it needs to be reinforced, or it needs to be just spoken about more, and just so that the youth can feel more confident in their self and their expression of their culture. The next point, spiritual guidance outside of Akom. I think this is a very, very important topic, and I love, as we know, the other topic aside from the youth meeting is acupuncture and spirituality. And I know, man, I'm looking like, dang, man, why that had to be on the same day? Because that's something that I would be interested in. I think for the youth, you see spirituality as you have to be a Akom to be spiritual. In which ways is our individual spirituality reinforced without having to go through training or without having to go through the lines? Like, outside of going through those lines of training or being a Akom or being a priest or being of service to your community in that way, if I'm just someone who just wants to come in and relax, and that wasn't the case with me. I was very, very deep into shrine life, shrine time. So I'm not speaking from my experience, but rather some of the experiences that I witnessed from some of my peers. Is like, do you still come here and is your spiritual health and wellness reinforced outside of coming to this one event where we drum and sing and we praise entities and deities? How do we enliven that same energy within ourselves? How do I make a shrine out of my brother or my sister? How do I the same way if someone could come and pour and speak life and speak love and speak so much engenderness when they go to the pot, and so much passion and genuine sincerity and love and appreciation to a shrine, how do we do that for each other? How is my spiritual health reinforced in if I just walk in a room, if it's not a spiritual event, And I think that is something that needs to be at least touched upon, spoken about, because I feel like that is a reason why a lot of people shy away. They feel as if, I don't know. I can't even say. I'm just assuming that might be a reason why some people might shy away. If they're not super into Akom and dancing and drumming, then they're not spiritual. And I know that's not what's meant to be said, or I know that's not the message that's meant to be put out. But it can be received that way. So I think that that's an important factor to, within the future to clarify or to just, do different projects. I love Agile Parry with the seeds of renewal, the yoga, the yoni steaming, the vegan eating, but bringing on all of these kind of different forms of wellness that might not necessarily have originated from Ghana, West Africa, but they can also be an influence of how we carry and how we hold ourselves here in America as a continent America. Next, the value of education, trades, and entrepreneurship. As Dr. Kwesi Amoah had mentioned to us earlier, he would not have opened his business had it not been for some of the experiences that he went through. And I think he worded it beautifully. He went and got a PhD so that y'all don't have to get a PhD. I don't want to get a PhD. I don't want to keep feeding this system, but certain things that I might have to do. I might have to get another degree just for what my field is in. But I think that there's an extreme value in trades that is underlying that isn't expressed. You know how much a plumber costs, or an electrician, or a carpenter, and having those skills and those tools would be invaluable. And if we had that within our community even more, then that just shows how much more, just how much more powerful that we would be, how much more tools in our tool chest we would have to build our community. So I think that there should be an even, expression of importance on going to college. And if you're not going to college, getting a trade, and if not, even with the trade, with both the college and the trade, starting a business. I don't think it's a versus thing. I don't think it's college versus entrepreneurship. I think both can feed each other, or one hand washes the other and both hands wash the face. So unity is a product of bringing two diverse individual things that might not look like one another, act like one another, and to work with one another. And I think that we should really emphasize the importance of education, of course, college. I think it is important. Even self-education, you can learn everything in college on YouTube, trades, and entrepreneurship. I think that all three of those things should all be emphasized in their individual importance, and how they can connect with one another should be emphasized. How to operate in two multi-religion households. That one is a little bit, tricky, but I think it's something that needs to be said and expressed. I think that there's a lot of hidden kind of trauma that surrounds that, that surrounds that topic. And for some people, maybe it's more pronounced. For some people, maybe it's less pronounced. But for youth growing up, it's hard to even have to think that you have to choose one versus another, and it's like, how can we have within our households kind of a respect and a mutual understanding for both, because these are all ways in which people explain God or explain connection to that divine source, that divine creator. So I think it would be better to identify the commonalities as opposed to the differences. I think that we shouldn't identify the differences, but we all also know the history of Christianity. We know the history of Islam, and we know that everything isn't always clean. And I think that we should still emphasize that each person is responsible for their connection to God. I appreciate that kind of culture, and for me, religion, as I was growing up, because that's what I saw it as. And the reason why I appreciated it most, because I was able to meet someone who was Hindu and be like, oh snap, y'all got deities too? I got deities too. Meet somebody that was from a whole different spectrum of what I thought of religiously, and understand that there was something that was in common. So it allowed me to be very open-minded with religion, and it allowed me to accept people no matter what religion they practice, no matter what God, what expression of God in which they choose to pray to. So I think that the conversation between living in multi-religious houses should be focused on. And the last boys' rites of passage, girls' rites of passage. I can't speak on the girls' rites of passage because I'm not a girl. I don't identify as a girl either, you know. But boys' rites of passage, I can say that there's more that we can do as a youth, as one of the older youths, I'll say. The Sappho camping trip, which was a renewal or revival of the Kofi Koto camping trip. It wasn't really a rites of passage, but it feels like that, especially for the young men that participate in it. And I think that with this topic being said, I myself will dedicate to being more, I guess, direct in terms of making sure, I mean, I already do that naturally, making sure that the young men that's around me, they're learning certain lessons and they're building their confidence in themselves, you know, regardless. And I think that there's certain principles that are taught, but I feel like having, Kofi Bonsu and Amankwa, they did have a rites of passage for young boys a few years back. And I don't know how long they continued it, but I think that both of them is something that's important. For the girls who went through rites of passages, who went through Yagorba, you know, maybe you can comment on the efficiency if you liked it, you didn't like it. You know, I don't really have any comments on that. I just know that it's important. I know that it is important. And without it, you know, you kind of lack a cultural identity.
I participated in puberty rights when I was a young girl, and it was phenomenal. It truly opened my eyes up to the Akom culture, and I think it's definitely something we should continue to do. My only thing with that is I think we should have a follow-up session, have a reunion, quote on say, because going on with some of the stuff that Perry said, I come from a household of two religions. My mother, Dana Amasewa, is a part of the Akom culture. However, my father is not. He was raised and born in Alabama with Christianity. And so that's why I kind of really want to emphasize again on the importance of our virtual presence as we're having. Do not forget about the virtual presence, because ever since our virtual Akoms and virtual activities that you all have had, I've never heard anything related to Akom. Not that I have, my mom speaks about it here and there, but I get to hear it once a week, whether I'm fully listening or not, but to hear Nana, to hear Yao, to hear those words that are a part of our culture really makes a difference for me. It allows me to think more about it, bring more attention to it, because otherwise I would just continue on with life and forget the importance of this. So again, I want to highlight the importance of having this virtual environment, but also saying that we really do need to have a follow-up with our puberty rights, because that's kind of all. I know the songs and the dances specific to puberty rights, but nothing aside from that. It's a phenomenal experience. So much fun.
I didn't go through puberty rights because I grew up in a dually religious household. My mom is Christian, my dad isn't. And so my mom wasn't comfortable with me going through it without having certain questions answered. And so for a while, I felt like I had really missed out on something. So I think we don't have to create an environment where like puberty rights is like just like end all that be all, but like building lots of these different social experiences that we've been talking about throughout this presentation. In terms of visions for the future, I really was asking two questions. What do you get out of the culture today, and what would you like to get out of the culture tomorrow? And so I have a couple of quotes here from different people from our group with what you get out of the culture today. And so these just some snippets. I love a get back. I get confidence, skills, and money. A community that is a large extended family and network of Pan-Africanists, a sense of peace and security, and an extended family from the culture. And I think so that's something that we all pretty much resonated on, which is that we all have a sense of family and community from what has grown over the last 3 generations. Is that we are all family. We have aunties in every corner of the world, and anywhere we need to go, we have somebody we can call on. And so answering this question of what you'd like to get out of the culture tomorrow is sometimes a little bit more difficult. And so some of the things that were said were a community that builds generational wealth and supports one another in different aspects of life. I wish to have grandchildren with hopes of them benefiting from our culture further. I'm honestly not sure. I don't know if I see myself in the culture in the future. I would like to see more inclusiveness. It's time to expand and share this community with people outside of ourselves, and gain a stronger understanding of the foundations, meaning, and purpose of the culture to build spiritual connection. And I think so much of what you get out of those few quotes is that there's more than the spiritual, there's more than the religious aspects of what we want to get out of this community, right? So much of what we love about this community is that we have all of our aunties and uncles and all these different people we can call on from different walks of life. And while we're not Christian, while we're not a church, what the church does well in many ways is the church has ministries, right? The church has the parking ministry, right? And I think it's important that we have different types of, if we don't want to call it ministries, what are ways that we can make sure that we're getting more out of this community than having family and having a Combs, right? And so the question is, like, do we have like an activism ministry? Like, what types of this youth ministry? Like, we created this youth collective over these past few weeks, and it's been great to hear everyone's different opinions, but let's make this institutional. And that's kind of what I want to see for the future, is creating some institutional, just like some borders, some boundaries, something that's firm that we can grab onto and be like, that's where I want to be today. That's who I want to talk to today, and not feel like there's a barrier to access. And so I really want us to continue to think about what it means to say, like, what do you get out of the culture today? And what would you like to get out of the culture tomorrow? And if that's in our mind every day when we're talking about how to grow this community, then we'll get somewhere. But if we continue to focus on like what we get out of the culture today, then we'll forget about the future and what we want to build.
That says a lot in terms of how we go back and get our other brothers and sisters that don't necessarily have the same advantage and blessing that we do of being birthed and raised into this community, into this culture. So by creating whatever we decide to call them, little groups or whatever that do certain things that go back and help our other brothers and sisters that are outside of this community right now, to bring them in, to give them a more family, to give them that spiritual guidance that so many are searching for. So just rebuild or reestablish that is a great way to do that, by having these ministries or what have you, where we're just able to give back.
It's also finding ways to keep those that are here.
Yeah.
Because part of the discussion we were having as the youth on this call is to say, like, we all appreciate Akom culture in a lot of different ways, and Akom spirituality and religion. But the question is, will we be here in the next 10 years? Are we going to be the leaders, or are we going to take a step back? And what does it mean that so many of us don't necessarily want to take a leadership role in this community, right? Like, we have to be open, we have to be honest with one another and open to developing and changing. And sometimes when you're surrounded by people who don't necessarily want to hear all of the different opinions that you may have, whether they're good or bad, so that we can discuss them, it doesn't feel like a place where you want to stay. And so we have to make this a family in a way that we encourage conversation regularly.
If we don't walk in a realm of open-mindedness and understand where each other is coming from and be able to yes and or evolve and adapt, then truthfully, I'm not sure how much longer this culture can survive without the adaptation, without the growth, without the continuation of, yes, bringing traditions forward, but also creating new ones, with also bringing the influence. And what does that change look like for the future? Because future is through adaptation, through growth. And if right now for me, it feels very stagnant, and growing up and just seeing the same things happen over and over again within my 23 years of life. What does that look like for 23 years now, especially if the youth essentially is supposed to be the people that take on that next step and that next chapter? And it feels like we're in a place where we want to learn, we want to understand, we want to know the traditions, we want that knowledge, but we're also coming with knowledge of how the world is moving on the outside from the younger standpoint. So how do we merge the two so that this culture and this community continues to flourish and thrive?
I'll go on and add that a lot of what I've been hearing is how this, when are we gonna have this? Who's there to do this? We should have this. That, I think, is a very bad thing to do. If there's anything that you want in your community, inside of your family, things that you would like to see done, it's up to you to go ahead and create that. It sounds like a lot of complaining to me, and I'm not looking to play devil's advocate here and tarnish this, but if you want that, you have to go ahead and do it. I mean, specifically, I'll give you an example. and this is for not just for our group, but I'm speaking in general here. A lot of the camping trips that my older brothers like Opari and Kofi and them would get to go on, those camping trips came to an end before I was of age to go on the trips. And so what did I do? I started the camping trips back up, and I took the young boys that came after me on the trips. I didn't sit there and complain and say, why isn't there anything for the young boys? Why isn't there this? I want to see that. I said, okay, I wasn't able to participate in that, but what I can do is I can put my foot down and start it up again. There's several things that I would like to see done within the community, but the last thing that I'll ever do is ask who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? If the idea comes to you, that means it's up to you to do it. That's why it came to you, because you're thinking of it. So it's up to you to act it out and get it started. And so I'm saying this so that you don't talk in circles here. If you guys have ideas or things that you want to see done, go ahead and do it. Plan it out. If there's other people that have the same mindset as you, but it's up to you to go ahead and do this. So please, let's not sit here and just say when, why, how, why not. Get it done.
Yeah, I think I appreciate your comment, but I also want to point out that we are on the slide about our concrete solutions about what we want to do moving forward, right? So we've had our discussions about what our visions are and what we would like to see change. And so what we said is, this is what we're about to do moving forward, right? And you've been a part of those conversations. And so for you to see it as just complaining and not us creating concrete solutions for how we're going to keep going, I think, I don't know if you're not listening to what we're talking about, but Asha and I have been discussing planning a retreat for the young woman. And then we talked as a group about creating these youth open calls for the next few weeks. And that's what Asha's going to talk about. I don't want to take away from her slide, but we have been having that holistic conversation. And so I don't want you to take away from the holistic conversation that we have been doing.
Yeah, and I will also, I don't think that Yao is incorrect in what he's saying. I agree. But I also feel like throughout this slide, one thing that we've been talking about community and the people that we're going to have behind us, it needs to still be an era of open-mindedness and willing to adapt and willing to change. Because yes, we can say we want to do a women's retreat, but if none of the women want to do it, it's just going to be a little vacation between me and Afia, and that it's different. And if we're trying to work in this communal aspect, I do agree, like, yes, we need to be active, we need to be doing things, but also it is a we. And if we're going to move forward as a collective, then we need to understand where each other's mindsets are. We need to have these conversations. We need to continuously be open. For the conversation we just had 20 minutes ago about going back and forth between Black, that was a dialogue happening where we're understanding people's opinion, and then we can move forward and we can evolve. Now I know something about someone else's opinion that I didn't know before. So now I can process that differently and plan to move X, Y, and Z. So I want to say that our conversations are not about staying stagnant. It's not about I'm just complaining and I'm doing this, that, and the third. It's no, I want to have a conversation so that way, if I do choose to move and create and expand, I know how to move properly and efficiently. I can't move without the knowledge of the other side. I can't move without knowing what my community is thinking and feeling. So if we're going to better it, we need to understand where everyone's at. On that note, I would like to have monthly and bi-weekly youth calls. We all discussed that. Just like JJ was saying earlier, just as a way for us to touch base with each other, for us to be able to talk about our experiences. We've discussed how it is growing up, having our names, and it's just a different type of communication that we're able to have with each other, that when we're discussing our elders and we're discussing the future, and we're discussing about who we want to talk to for X, Y, and Z, you can refer an auntie, you can refer an uncle for me to go to. It's about us as the youth establishing a bond and a connection with each other, so that way our relationships with the elders can continue to grow. What does the future hold? Broader ideas. Financial stability, which a lot of us discuss, community emergency fund to help the community members in need within the culture, outside the culture, just because we all go through hardships. We never know what's going to happen. So for us to have something that can help each other, support each other, would just be phenomenal, honestly. Open dialogue about how we help others that are not involved in the Akom community? What are we doing to give back on the outside? Again, if we have these small ministries, if we're protesting on the outside, I'm a big protester, I'm out there all the time. So it's finding ways that we can also expose this community, this culture that we've had, this brilliance that we've had, and then bring other people in. Growing the community with an open heart and mind. Again, this whole PowerPoint for the youth was to express how we're feeling, to show our opinion, for everyone in this particular PowerPoint right now to get a view of how everyone else is looking at things. So we can grow, we can expand, we can have dialogue. So I don't want this to be something where now we're wrong because of having our opinion, because it's not that way. We can only move forward if we're open to having a dialogue, and we can agree or disagree on certain things, but we need to be able to have those conversations without the other side feeling like their opinions don't matter, feeling like they're shut out. Because then from there, why would I want to be a part of something that is not fully accepting my opinion, my body, my mind, but I'm supposed to come in Akom in this environment where it's not open, I can't express myself the way I want to. So what does that family actually mean and look like? And this is my experience, this is experience of a few of the other youth members. And we're just here to express that so that way we're able to develop, we're able to create bonds and relationships. It's not in a way to say one side is wrong, one side is right, but it's about the conversation of how we're expanding, how we're going to evolve together as a community, as a we. Moving by the time.
All right, this is the end of the presentation, and the presentation was maybe 2.5 hours long. It actually went a little longer than what it did. So we had a couple of people edit it and focus it into 1 hour and 15 minutes so we can have 15-minute dialogue. I know a lot of the comments were very proud of the young adults of coming together. They loved hearing the perspectives of the youth. They're working together, thinking, feeling, they are everything. Another person said, I have so much respect, pride, and love for all of these young adults. My brothers, Yaw and Opari, represent the men of our community well, both articulate the love for our community eloquently. I am so blessed and grateful to bear witness. So a lot of people were enjoying hearing the voices of our youth, but one of the questions that I want to follow up on is one of the things that the youth wanted to do was to create a retreat. So one of the things that is on the table, and nothing is concrete, is possibly making next year Akom Kese a retreat for the youth, and for the youth to develop the programs so the adults can sit and conversate with them about our future. Does anyone have any thoughts about the presentation today? Please feel free to share. No comments, no thoughts, no opinions. I know one of the things that
Macho, this is not a Kwesi Ajuman. I was very impressed, as I was last year, and I'm encouraged by the diversity of thoughts and opinions and how well they all were expressed. Some of them are new to me, and some of them that I would hope that there's an avenue and an opportunity when we all sit down collectively, older people such as myself, middle-aged people, and these youth, and have collective conversations about the things that they brought to the table. And I think that I've always felt strongly that the full expression of the Akan American community needed to begin to incorporate more aspects of traditional Akan America as it's relevant and what role it plays in the African American experience. So I heard a lot of that today, and I was very happy to hear it. Madasa.
Thank you, Nana. Anyone else? That's what I don't believe any of the presenters are on the call today. I do not believe any of them are here, but it seems as though we do have a calling for us to gather them and get them together. So maybe possibly within the next couple of months, we could have a Zoom meeting of some sort and have them all here so we can have that open dialogue that they were so yearning for.
Hi, this is Coach Bakan. I wanted to know, you mentioned that the presentation was edited for time. Were there any suggestions given on how they wanted us to support them? because we can talk about whatever we want, but if it's not what they're looking for, it doesn't make much difference.
Yes.
So what did they have? What options or suggestions that they have for us to support them and what they want to do?
They did not have any suggestions per se. One of the things that was prevalent throughout the presentation was an open dialogue. And one of the things they feel is that they don't have that open dialogue with the community as a whole. Not to say that they don't have a dialogue with certain elders and certain other members of the community, but they do not feel as a whole that their voices are welcome. So one of the things that I know Akom Kese was talking about previously was setting up that dialogue and setting up that platform for us to come together and for them to be able to have that dialogue with us and for them to tell us what they are looking for and what they want. I know one of the things that the young ladies of the presenters indicated is that they wanted to have a female retreat. They want that. So that's something that's made known. So if we have any volunteers or somebody who wants to get that together, myself will work with some of the youth and anyone else who wants to volunteer. Please put that information in the chat, give me your contact information, and we will reach out to you to see what we can do in regards to a female retreat.
I'd like to also suggest that if anyone has an actual contact with them, besides their parents, obviously, to encourage them to engage in the conversations that we do have on the Akom Kese board on the Facebook page, right? And so there are times when we pose questions that are for everyone to answer. And, you know, we have a very select few people who do answer those questions, right? And so they are open for everyone to answer. And that, I think that will be a great opportunity for them to give their opinions, say, you know, to share and engage in a dialogue. So we do have opportunities just for everyone to take advantage of them.
Another thing I wanted to mention is that another thing that they were actually doing where they were having their open youth calls where they would actually call each other, check in with each other, verify that everyone's doing well. So that was another thing that came out of this presentation is that they were doing youth call checks upon each other. And that hasn't stopped, but it hasn't continued as frequently. And I do want to say that's probably due to COVID-19 and all of the issues that we're going to. But I want to say that's probably more so than ever that we need to follow up with that and make sure they're checking in with each other in addition to us checking in with them. I have another comment that says, as an observer, I'm not a member of your community. I am impressed by the well thought out presentation. They did suggest a bi-weekly youth call and that they were doing that at one time. Someone else says that she is interested in assisting with a female retreat. She's given her contact information and we will be contacting you, Nana Akuya.
This is Rakia Insia. I'm going to give you my information as well. I would definitely like to participate with the youth and the retreat. I grew up in the, I grew up as an Akan in America and kind of reared away from my home life for a time and then came back. And one of the things that I was really thinking about while listening to this presentation, I mean, I was very moved by all of what they had to say, but I was also thinking when I was younger, a lot of the times, I think not even Akan culture, but African-American culture in a whole, it was common that a child should be seen but not heard. And so with that premise, a lot of times I think as a youth, I was silenced and children or adolescents feel like they're silenced. But this was just creating creating this space and the opportunity for the adolescents to communicate with the adults. I think it's really positive for some of the, like all of the people who are on this platform today were young adults, but some of even the younger adults or younger children, I think that this kind of communication will be very effective in perpetuating the culture long term, because some of the things that Opari spoke of being in the public school system and feeling culture shock and feeling like bullied per se, having that space to come back to and be able to communicate some of what they're experiencing with the adults, I think would be very productive long-term.
All right, well, thank you for that comment. Now, I also heard you say that you moved away for a period of time from the culture and you came back. Did any of that have to do with some of the things that some of the youth were expressing today in their presentation?
So the funny thing is, was never 100% the culture. I would say Akom life, because I kind of claimed Akan in my DNA. Like, I knew that I was Akan always, but I reared away from Akom life. I literally was in training and broke training. So I would say that I reared away from Akom life, but not necessarily Akan culture. I think it was almost impossible because it was embedded in me. But there were some things. I mean, I did experience culture shock in high school that probably made it more difficult for me it made it probably easier for me to part because of some of that culture shock and some of the other influences. And not having this kind of communication that I heard today with my elders probably helped it to happen more readily. Had I been able to have some of this open dialogue, I think it may have supported me in a different way. So I really, really appreciated hearing them, because especially because of my experience, I'm hearing it from that place.
Right, and I think that's exactly what the youth were speaking of. They need that open dialogue, or else we may lose them. And I know none of us want that. I know the time is 8:24. We also have a men's and women's group meeting coming up next, but I'm just going to say a couple of other comments. It says that I am in such awe of our young adults. So impressive. If we continue to support them, we will be in good hands. And someone else indicated that they had the same experience as a child. You were seen and not heard. So hopefully we've heard their voices today, and we can extend a hand and extend a voice so they could be heard louder and stronger. So I thank you all for joining us today with this session. And the session for the men's session and the women's sessions will begin at 8:30. So I'll let you all take a 5-minute break, log out, and hopefully we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes for the individual groups.